Sister, I'm begging you, please give Wei Lang to me. If I can't marry him, I'd rather cut off my hair and become a nun. The shrill cries pierced the festive cheer of the Marquis of Chongqing's residence that early morning. I sat upright before the dressing table, letting the woman responsible for preparing the bride's face draw the ceremonial lines on mine. Through the polished Qingxin bronze mirror before me, I coldly watched Jiang Mingxue kneeling on the floor, clutching a coarse cloth wedding robe with all her strength. In her hand was a cold pair of scissors, the sharp tips pressed firmly against her snow-white neck, already leaving a glaring streak of blood. Mingxue! What are you doing? Put down the scissors, quickly, you'll hurt yourself. Her mother's face went white with fright. She rushed forward to seize the scissors, but Jiang Mingxue shoved her away. Don't come any closer, mother. If you force me into the bridal sedan for the Huo family today, I'll die right in front of you. Jiang Mingxue wept, tears streaming down her face. Her originally delicate features now looked somewhat distorted by desperation and madness. Her father trembled with rage, even the hand pointing at her shaking. You ungrateful wretch! General Huo is an extraordinary man, commanding a powerful army and feared throughout the realm. The fact that he is willing to lower himself to marry a second daughter of the Marquis's household is a blessing earned over 8 lifetimes. That Wei Shuxian is nothing but a poor scholar from a destitute family who can't even scrape together the betrothal gifts. What madness has possessed you, insisting on snatching your elder sister's marriage? At her father's words, a trace of barely perceptible fervor and greed flashed in Jiang Mingxue's eyes. She turned her head and looked straight at me, her eyes concealing a malice and smugness that only I could understand. Sister, I know you have been dignified and virtuous since childhood, and surely you cannot bear to watch your younger sister die. Although General Huo holds a high position and great power, he has spent years fighting on the battlefield, living each day with his life on the line. My health is delicate, and I truly cannot endure such constant fear and anxiety. Although Wei Lang is poor, the two of us have long been in love. I beg you to grant us your blessing. Watching her look so eager to force her way into the Wei family, I lightly touched the red gold hairpin adorned with kingfisher feathers at my temple, the corners of my lips curving into an almost imperceptible smile. I understood. Jiang Mingxue was reborn too. In her previous life, she had joyfully married Huizhan, a man of high status and power, while I obeyed the marriage arrangement our father had made years earlier and married Wei Shuxian, a poor scholar who could barely afford enough food. Later, Huizhan was wounded on the battlefield, and rumors spread that he was incapable of fathering children. After spending 3 years alone in the general's residence, Jiang Mingxue could no longer bear the loneliness and had an affair, causing a scandal of enormous proportions. In the end, Huizhan granted her death with a cup of poisoned wine. As for me, relying on the unparalleled medical texts left behind by my maternal grandfather and my generous dowry, I smoothed Wei Shuxian's path through officialdom and helped him rise rapidly through the ranks until he became the current Grand Chancellor. I became the capital's most honored first-rank imperial mandated lady. Before she died, Jiang Mingxue lunged at me like a rabid dog and plunged a poison-coated hairpin into my chest, cursing me through bloodshot eyes for stealing the position of Grand Chancellor's wife that should have been hers. Now that she has opened her eyes again, she couldn't wait to threaten suicide to snatch Wei Shuxian away from me, dumping the airless living devil, Huizhan, on me. She thought that as long as she married Wei Shuxian, she could, just as I had in my previous life, naturally become the exalted wife of the Grand Secretary and enjoy a lifetime of wealth and glory. How laughably foolish. She had no idea that Wei Shuxian, that hypocritical beast in human skin, owed all his later success to the lavish dowry I had practically smashed into him. Without my mountains of gold and silver, as well as my medical expertise and strategic wisdom, that narrow-minded, selfish, and cold-hearted man, Wei Shuxian, wouldn't even have passed the provincial exam. Since she is so eager to jump into the fire, how could I, as her elder sister, refuse to help her? Father, mother, please don't let your daughter cause discord between you. I rose to my feet, the hem of my red wedding dress trailing across the floor in watery ripples. I walked up to Jiang Mingxue and looked down at her from above. My tone was gentle and calm, yet carried an unmistakable resolve. Since my younger sister and young Master Wei are in love with each other, I'll give this marriage to you. Ming Shuang, what nonsense are you talking about? Mother grabbed my hand, her eyes rimmed red. The Wei family is so poor they don't even have a decent house. If you married into that family, wouldn't you suffer terribly? Besides, the Huo family's bridal sedan has already arrived at the gate. If they find out the bride has been replaced, how could our Marquis' residence withstand General Huo's thunderous wrath? Mother, rest assured. I clasped my mother's hand in return and gently patted it. As for the substitute marriage, I will explain everything to General Huo myself. The Marquis' Manor's reputation will never be damaged because of my sister's momentary folly. If I anger the Huo family, I will bear the responsibility alone. I spoke with such righteous conviction, displaying the responsibility of the Marquis' legitimate eldest daughter to perfection. When Jiang Mingxue saw that I had agreed so readily, she was stunned at first. Then, ecstatic light burst from her eyes. She was probably laughing at my stupidity inwardly. How foolish of me to take the initiative to marry Huizhan, that impotent good-for-nothing, for the sake of some ridiculous family reputation. Thank you, sister, for making this possible. I will never forget your great kindness. Jiang Mingxue immediately dropped the scissors and clutched the crude wedding dress tightly, as though afraid I might change my mind. Before long, thunderous wedding music and joyous cries rang out from beyond the gate. Outside the Marquis' residence stood two bridal palanquins that could not have been more different. One was the 8-bearer palanquin sent by the Huo family, with a golden roof and red curtains, round South Sea pearls hanging from each of its four corners. The bearers were all elite soldiers who had retired from the military, each radiating a grim, battle-hardened air. The betrothal gifts accompanying the wedding procession stretched from one end of the street to the other, 10 miles of red wedding finery, extravagantly lavish. The other was a pair of dilapidated 2-bearer palanquins rented by Wei Shuxian. Even the paper wedding characters on their curtains had begun to fade. Jiang Mingxue impatiently had her maid place the crudely embroidered red bridal veil over her head. Without even sparing the Huo family's luxurious sedan chair a glance, she plunged into the Wei family's shabby little sedan like a fledgling swift returning to its nest, afraid that if she were even a moment too late, the seat of chief minister's wife might sprout wings and fly away. I stood on the steps, watching the battered little sedan sway away amid the desolate sound of the Suona. At last, an icy smile touched the corners of my lips. Wei Shuxian appeared refined and scholarly on the outside, but at heart he was an extremely insecure yet arrogant madman. In my previous life, he had still pretended to be aloof and principled in front of me. Now that he was paired with Jiang Mingxue, an equally selfish, spoiled fool, the Wei family's inner household would likely become a living hell before long. Mingxue, you must hold on. The good days of being the chief minister's wife have only just begun. Miss, the auspicious hour has arrived. Please enter the bridal sedan. The elderly matchmaker sent by the Huo family stepped forward and respectfully bowed to me. I gave a slight nod and, with the help of my maid, steadily made my way toward the resplendent sedan chair carried by 8 bearers. The wedding banquet at the general's residence was not nearly as boisterous as the Marquis' residence. Everywhere, it exuded the distinctive austerity and strict order of a military household. I sat upright at the edge of the bridal bed, a cumbersome and elaborate phoenix crown weighing heavily on my head. The red bridal veil blocked my view, allowing me to see only my hands folded in my lap. Nearby, the dragon and phoenix wedding candles crackled softly, burning with a faint sandalwood fragrance. Who knows how much time had passed when the door was pushed open, and a cold, sharp breeze carrying the night air and a faint scent of alcohol rushed in. Accompanied by the steady, powerful sound of military boots, a pair of black boots embroidered with golden thread came to a stop before me. A wedding scale wrapped in red silk lifted my veil. Beneath the flickering candlelight, I finally saw what Huizhan looked like. He was exceptionally tall and imposing, with sword-shaped brows sweeping into his temples and eyes like cold stars. Beneath his high, straight nose were thin, tightly pressed lips. A faint knife scar marked the left side of his brow ridge. Far from marring his handsome features, it lent him an added air of blood-forged severity and wildness that sent a chill down the spine. At this moment, he looked down at me from above. There was no joy befitting a groom in his deep-set eyes, only the icy, scrutinizing stillness of a dead pool. The Marquis of Chongping's household certainly has some tricks up its sleeve. Even at the last moment before she entered the bridal sedan, you managed to replace the second daughter with the eldest. Huizhan casually tossed the wedding wreath scale onto the table nearby, his voice low and hard, without a trace of emotion. I rose to my feet and gave him a calm curtsy, my tone neither servile nor overbearing. "General, please forgive us. My younger sister is young and ignorant, and has acted recklessly. But the marriage arrangement between the Marquis's household and the general cannot be annulled. As the eldest daughter of the Jiang family, it is only right that I take responsibility for this marriage. If you are angry, Ming Shuang will bear it all." At my words, Huizhan raised an eyebrow slightly, seemingly somewhat surprised by my unruffled composure. He walked over to the table, poured 2 nuptial cups of wine, and handed one to me. "Aren't you afraid of me?" He stared intently into my eyes, as if he wanted to see straight through to my soul. "Rumor has it in the capital that I, Huizhan, have killed countless people and have a violent temperament. Worse, I suffer from a private ailment and am an impotent cripple. Your sister was so frightened by all this that she would rather die than marry me." He spoke with blunt, bone-chilling frankness, making no attempt to conceal his private ailment. I accepted the cup and met his gaze directly, replying softly, "Rumors are nothing more than gossip from the streets. General, you protect our homeland and defend our country, you are a great hero of our nation. As for your ailment, now that Ming Shuang has married into the general's household, I am your wife. Whether it brings misfortune or blessing, I shall bear it alongside you." With that, I tilted my head back and drained the bitter, potent liquor in my cup. Huizhan looked at me, his gaze turning several shades deeper. He, too, tipped back his head and finished his drink. Then he set down his cup, turned, and walked toward the door. This marriage was arranged simply to put my mother at ease. "Since you've taken your sister's place, then stay in this rear courtyard and be your general's wife. As long as you don't cause trouble, the general's residence can guarantee you a lifetime of wealth and honor. As for anything else..." He stopped without turning around, his voice cold as ice, "I cannot give you that. I'll sleep in the study tonight. Go to bed early." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure suddenly swayed. His tall body staggered forward uncontrollably, and his right hand shot out to grip the corner of the table, the veins bulging on the back of his hand. "The poison is taking effect." My heart tightened, but I pretended to look startled. I hurried forward and grabbed his left arm to support him. "General! What's wrong? Don't touch me!" Huizhan growled, instinctively trying to shake me off. His entire body was as cold as iron, as if he had just been dragged out of an icy hell. This unnatural cold was the telltale symptom of the entwined silk poison taking effect. The toxin traveled through his bloodstream, freezing his meridians and forcing him to endure excruciating pain, as if countless ants were gnawing at his bones, every time the poison flared up. I was not intimidated by his cold expression. Instead, while helping him up, I discreetly placed 3 fingers on his Cun, Guan, and Qi pulse points. His pulse was deep and slow, thin and rough as silk, while a chill was pressing straight toward his heart meridian. Sure enough, this was no irreparable injury sustained on the battlefield, it was outright poisoning. Moreover, the poisoner's methods were extraordinarily sophisticated, administering only minuscule amounts each time. Over time, this had created the false appearance that he was incapable of fathering children and growing weaker by the day. "General, do you feel as though all your limbs and bones have fallen into an ice cave, with a splitting headache and waves of stabbing pain in your chest?" I asked in a low, certain voice as I steadily supported him. Huizhan abruptly turned to look at me, and a flicker of extreme shock flashed through his eyes, which had been filled with wariness and savagery. When his condition flared up, the pain was excruciating, and the symptoms were difficult to detect. Over the years, he had consulted every renowned physician in the capital, even the imperial doctors had been powerless to help. All they could do was speak vaguely of how his years of warfare had damaged his health at its root, leaving him deficient in both qi and blood and unable to father children. He had never described in detail to anyone what he specifically felt when the poison took effect. How had this delicate woman, who had only just married into the household, seen through it with a single sentence? "You understand medicine?" Huizhan gritted his teeth, forcibly enduring the waves of excruciating pain surging through him. His voice was terrifyingly hoarse. My maternal grandfather was once a senior physician at the Imperial Medical Institute. Ming Shuang stayed by his side from childhood and learned a few unconventional remedies. I helped him to a nearby Luohan couch and supported him as he sat down. My voice was gentle, yet carried a reassuring strength. "If the general trusts me, let me massage your acupoints. It may ease the pain somewhat." Huizhan was in such pain that his forehead was covered in sweat, his thin lips pressed into a straight line. He stared fixedly at me for a long while before finally closing his eyes, which counted as tacit consent. I walked behind him, gathered a precise force at my fingertips, and pressed accurately on the Fengqi, Taiyang, Baihui, and other major acupoints on his head. My technique was not ordinary massage, but the Yangming finger technique recorded in the medical book left behind by my maternal grandfather, specifically used to unblock meridians obstructed by cold poison. As I pressed, Huizhan's tense body gradually relaxed. He could clearly feel a faint yet enduring warmth slowly seeping into his icy meridians through my fingertips, gradually forcing back the frigid energy wreaking havoc within him. After half an hour, Huizhan's breathing finally steadied. He opened his eyes, and his gaze was much clearer. "Are you feeling any better?" I withdrew my hand, picked up the silk handkerchief beside me, and gently wiped the fine sweat beading on my forehead, smiling as I looked at him. Huizhan looked at me. There was less of the guardedness and indifference he had shown when we first met, and a hint more curiosity in his eyes. "Your maternal grandfather's medical skills are quite extraordinary." He rose to his feet. Though his tone remained stiff, the icy hostility that had kept others at arm's length was gone. "This is merely a way to alleviate the symptoms. General, this is not a simple external injury, you have been afflicted with an extremely rare cold poison." I met his eyes without flinching and dropped this bombshell. Huizhan's pupils suddenly contracted. "Poisoned?" The aura around him instantly changed, and an intense killing intent permeated the lavishly decorated wedding chamber. "Yes. And the person who administered the poison is right here in the general's residence." Over time, it caused the general to bear the stigma of being unable to sire an heir. I calmly met his gaze, my tone resolute. "If the general trusts me, Ming Shuang is absolutely certain she can cure this poison and restore the general to a healthy condition." A deathly silence filled the room. The dragon and phoenix wedding candles burst into a shower of bright sparks. After a long while, Huizhan gave me a deep look. He did not mention going to the study to rest again. Instead, he turned and walked to the wedding bed, then lay down fully clothed. "Do not make a fuss about this poison." With his eyes closed, his voice low, he said, "After we pay our respects over tea tomorrow, take over household affairs from Nanny Lu. You will investigate the matters in the inner residence." Looking at his broad back, I smiled silently. First, turn his own scheme against him and break through his defenses against me. Second, use his hand to purge the inner household. Huizhan, now that I have become the mistress of this general's residence, I will never let you repeat the mistakes of your previous life. Those secretly plotting to take your life, I will root them out one by one with my own hands. On the second day of our marriage, just as dawn was breaking, Huizhan rose to attend the morning court. He left without waking me, placing at the bedside the tally symbolizing the authority of the general's wife, along with the keys to the storeroom. I gazed at the heavy ring of keys, and a cold glint flashed in my eyes. There were no proper elders in the rear residence of the general's manor. Huizhan's mother had moved to an estate outside the city to recuperate in her early years, so the household's domestic authority had always remained in the hands of Huizhan's wet nurse, Nanny Lu. In my previous life, Nanny Lu had always been the sort who fawned on those above her and trampled on those below. After Jiang Mingxue married into the family, she spent her days complaining bitterly because she resented Huizhan for being infertile and could not be bothered to manage household affairs. Nanny Lu had her completely under her thumb and managed to empty out more than half of the enormous general's manor to subsidize her maiden family. But I would never let such a thing happen. At precisely the hour of the dragon, I sat upright in the principal seat of the main hall, leisurely toying with my teacup. Standing below me were the stewards in charge of the various parts of the household, led by the dignified-looking, haughty Nanny Lu. Madam has only just married and ought to rest for a few more days. The household affairs here are complicated, but this old servant has managed them for over a decade and knows them like the back of her hand. If Madam does not object, this old servant would be happy to continue taking the burden off your shoulders. Though Nanny Lu spoke deferentially, she did not even bend her waist, clearly showing that she did not take me, the Marquis's eldest daughter who had come here as a substitute bride, seriously. I set down my teacup, and the porcelain struck the table with a crisp, icy sound. Nanny, you are advanced in years and should enjoy a life of leisure. Before the general left, he instructed me to establish new rules for this general's residence. I took the authority token from my sleeve and slammed it onto the table. Someone, bring me all the account books from every department. Nanny Lu's expression changed slightly, but she still forced herself to remain calm and had people carry in more than a dozen tall stacks of account books. She was certain that a young lady who had only just married into the family could not possibly understand these tangled accounts. Unfortunately, she had miscalculated one thing. In my previous life, I had single-handedly dragged the impoverished Wei family up into a family of grand secretaries. These accounts were riddled with flaws in my eyes. In less than half an hour, I had uncovered more than a dozen falsified accounts and shortfalls, most of them related to the purchasing and kitchen operations overseen by Nanny Lu. Nanny Lu, why did the money spent purchasing the finest bird's nest exceed the market price by a full 30%? And how did those 2 jade Buddhas missing from the storeroom somehow become bad debts? My eyes were sharp as I fixed her with an unrelenting stare. Cold sweat beaded on Nanny Lu's forehead as she argued stubbornly, Madam, there are things you don't understand. Naturally, everything used in the general's residence has to be the finest, so the market price cannot be taken as a reference. Shut up! I shouted, cutting her off sharply. You vile servant, lining your own pockets and deceiving your mistress. Someone, seize Nanny Lu. Detain everyone in her quarters and search her rooms thoroughly. The several senior maids who had come with me as part of my dowry pounced on Nanny Lu like wolves and tigers, pinning her to the ground. How dare you! I'm the general's wet nurse. You're merely a replacement bride brought in to become his second wife. What right do you have to punish me? I'll wait for the general to return. Nanny Lu struggled violently, shrieking insults. I paid no attention to her tirade and led my people straight toward the kitchen. The shortfall in the accounts was merely an excuse. My real purpose was to find the source of the poison that had been harming Huizhan. The people in the kitchen had already been subdued. I walked straight to the small red clay stove that had always been personally watched over by Nanny Lu. On it was the qi-nourishing soup that Huizhan had to drink every day. Using a damp cloth to protect my hand, I lifted the lid of the earthenware pot, and a strong, bitter medicinal smell rushed toward me. I scooped up a little of the medicinal dregs with a silver spoon, held them beneath my nose, and examined their scent carefully before rubbing them between my fingertips. Besides common restorative herbs such as angelica and astragalus, I detected an extremely faint, fishy-sweet odor. Just as I thought. I let out a cold laugh. This was precisely the catalyst for the entwined silk poison, the snake blood vine, unique to the western regions. This vine is colorless and odorless, making it extremely difficult to detect. But when boiled together with astragalus, it produces a slow-acting deadly poison. Over time, it can silently destroy a man's vitality and ultimately take his life. Take these medicinal dregs and Matron Lu back to the main hall under guard. When Huijan returned to the residence after court, the atmosphere in the main hall was so tense it seemed almost frozen solid. Nanny Lu knelt on the floor, bound hand and foot, with a thick stack of banknotes discovered in her room scattered beside her, along with a packet of the still-unused snakeblood vine. What is going on? Huijan strode into the main hall, his brows tightly furrowed, the lingering chill of the outdoors still clinging to him. The moment Nanny Lu saw Huijan, she seemed to have found her savior and immediately burst into loud sobs. "General, save me! Madam has only just arrived, yet in order to assert her authority, she actually means to make an example of this old servant. I raised the general from infancy. If I have no great merit, I have at least worked hard. And yet Madam has falsely accused me of embezzlement, and even claims that I intended to poison your medicine." Huijan turned to look at me, a flicker of scrutiny passing through his deep, dark eyes. I rose unhurriedly and handed the packet of snakeblood vine, along with the medicinal dregs, to Huijan, my tone so calm it was almost infuriating. "General, this is what I mentioned last night, the culprit responsible for the cold poison in your body, the Western region's snakeblood vine. This substance has been added to the chi-nourishing soup that Nanny Lu personally prepares for you every day. The vine is incompatible with astragalus. Taken over a long period, it produces an extremely cold poison that erodes your meridians. If you do not believe me, General, you may summon the finest imperial physician in the capital to examine these medicinal dregs and see whether there is any deception." Huijan's gaze fell upon the medicinal dregs, and his eyes instantly turned cold and keen, like a drawn blade. He did not doubt my words. My pressure point technique last night had already made him place complete faith in my medical skills. "Nanny Lu." Huijan slowly walked up to Nanny Lu and looked down at the wet nurse he had once respected. His voice was filled with bone-chilling murderous intent. "Who ordered you to do this?" Nanny Lu's entire body trembled violently. Knowing that her crime had been exposed, she repeatedly kowtowed. "General, spare my life. It was the Marquis of Pingyang. The Marquis of Pingyang threatened me with my son, who had lost money gambling outside the city, and forced me to do this. I had no choice." The Marquis of Pingyang was none other than Huijan's sworn enemy at court, whose political views were at odds with his. Huijan did not listen to another word of her rambling. He waved his hand coldly. "Take her away and beat her to death. Throw her corpse, along with this confession, outside the gates of the Marquis of Pingyang's residence. As for the Marquis of Pingyang, I will make him pay the price himself." "Yes." The guards dragged the wailing Nanny Lu away. The main hall once again fell into deathly silence. Huijan turned around and stared fixedly at me. Sunlight streamed through the window lattice onto his profile, softening the steely severity of his features. "Madam." He suddenly spoke, his voice low and solemn. It was the first time he had addressed me with such formality. "Thank you for what you did today. If it weren't for you, I, Hua, might still be kept in the dark." I bent my knees slightly and returned a dignified curtsy. "You give me too much credit, General. As the mistress of the general's residence, I, Ming Shuang, will never allow anyone to harm my husband. While you defend our home and country beyond these walls, I shall naturally clear away the demons and monsters lurking within this household on your behalf." Huijan looked at me. For the first time, a hint of warmth surfaced in those eyes that had once been like a deep, icy pool. He stepped forward and reached out to support my wrist, his broad palm warm and strong. "With a wife like you, I, Hua, am truly fortunate." I knew that from this moment on, I was no longer the dispensable replacement bride, but had truly entered the heart of this iron-blooded general. As for Jiang Mingxue, she was probably still in that dilapidated courtyard of the Wei family, quarreling with the maids who served at Wei Shuxian's side over a few taels of silver. The real show had only just begun. Ever since Nanny Lu was exposed that day, the general's inner residence had become as impenetrable as an iron fortress, and not the slightest hint of wind or sand could penetrate it. Using the pretext of regulating his qi and blood, I personally prepared detoxifying medicinal soups for Huizhan every day and supplemented them with acupuncture. Huizhan was extremely cooperative. Even though the detoxification process was as excruciating as having his bones scraped and flesh pared away, he never uttered a sound. In just half a year, the silken thread poison in his body had been completely eradicated by me. Once the poison was gone, Huizhan's face, which had been slightly pale from years of suffering, regained a healthy wheat complexion. His restraint in bed collapsed along with it. The street rumors that he was incapable of being a man were utterly shattered on every night when red waves surged and rolled. The following spring, I discovered that I was pregnant. When Huizhan learned the news, this iron-blooded general, who never even furrowed his brow before thousands of troops, actually embraced me tightly in front of all the maids and matrons in the courtyard, his eyes reddening with emotion and his hands trembling slightly. To be safe, I had Huizhan keep the news of my pregnancy secret from the outside world. First, so I could focus on nurturing the baby in peace. Second, so I could see just how long those hoping for our general's residence to remain without an heir could continue their antics. Over the 10 months of my pregnancy, Huizhan pampered me until my complexion was rosy and I was positively radiant. Meanwhile, in the dilapidated Wei family courtyard south of the city, one farce after another was unfolding. The people I sent to make discreet inquiries reported that Jiang Mingshua's life was truly a living hell. Wei Shuxian was, at heart, an extremely vain and insecure hypocrite. In my previous life, I had used stacks of silver notes to buy my way into the doors of the powerful, paving his path to success, and only then was he able to come first in all 3 levels of the imperial examinations. But in this life, the paltry dowry Jiang Mingxua brought was nowhere near enough for him to use in cultivating connections. Without the mountain of money behind him, Wei Shuxian failed the autumn imperial examination this year. He vented all his pent-up rage on Jiang Mingxua, beating and berating her at the slightest provocation. Not only that, but he also brought into the household a female cousin he had kept outside, using Jiang Mingshua's inability to bear children as an excuse, and made her his favored concubine. That cousin was no pushover either. Relying on Wei Shuxian's favor, she imposed rules on Jiang Mingxua day after day. Jiang Mingxua had been pampered from birth. How could she possibly endure such humiliation? Yet she did not dare divorce Wei Shuxian, because she still harbored a deep resentment in her heart. She firmly believed that Wei Shuxian would become the Grand Secretariat sooner or later, and that marrying me to that worthless eunuch would certainly leave me worse off than her. Clinging to this self-deceiving fantasy, Jiang Mingxua endured life in the Wei household until she became a sallow, emaciated woman consumed by resentment. At last, in late autumn, I went into labor. I endured a day and a night of pain in the delivery room, while Huizhan stood outside like a fiendish guardian. Several times, he drew his sword and tried to charge and to take my suffering upon himself, only to be held back by the maids with all their might. Accompanied by 2 loud cries, the midwife's voice, brimming with surprise and joy, rang throughout the entire general's residence. "Congratulations, General! Congratulations, General! Madam has given birth to a pair of dragon and phoenix twins. Mother and children are safe and well." A dragon and phoenix bringing auspiciousness, this was an omen of the greatest fortune. More importantly, it completely dispelled the rumors that General Huo would have no descendants. A month later, the general's residence hosted a grand 1-month celebration banquet. That day, the capital's powerful and influential figures gathered in droves, and even the imperial palace sent generous congratulatory gifts. The carriages and horses outside the general's residence stretched for 2 whole streets. I wore a long, bright red brocade gown woven with gold thread, with a 9-tailed phoenix hairpin that Huizhan had personally forged for me in my hair. I sat dignified and composed in the seat of honor. 2 exquisitely beautiful babies were being held by their wet nurses, drawing endless praise from the assembled noblewomen. With a loud bang, a commotion suddenly erupted outside the main hall. "Get out of my way! I'm the 2nd young lady of the Marquis's residence, and your madam's own younger sister. Who dares stop me?" Accompanied by her sharp, hoarse shouting, a haggard woman dressed in somewhat worn silk clothing forcefully shoved past the guards at the entrance and barged into the main hall. The main hall instantly fell silent, and everyone's eyes turned to this uninvited guest. It was Jiang Mingxue. She had heard that the general's residence was hosting a grand banquet and assumed I was planning to adopt children from the clan to put on a show. So she had deliberately dressed up, intending to publicly mock me, the barren wife, and reclaim a little of her pitiful sense of superiority. But the moment she saw the scene in the hall clearly, her entire body froze in place. Her eyes, made somewhat frightening by her gauntness, widened as she stared fixedly at the twins in the wet nurse's arms. Then she looked incredulously toward me, seated upright in the place of honor, my face glowing and my beauty surpassing even that of my unmarried days. No. Impossible. Jiang Mingxue seemed to have had all the strength drained from her body as she muttered to herself, "He's clearly an invalid. He was clearly incapable of fathering children. Where did these children come from? They must be bastards you brought in from outside." She suddenly went berserk, pointing at me and screaming, trying to use such vicious words to conceal the extreme panic and breakdown in her heart. Outrageous! A thunderous roar, charged with fury, rang out through the hall. Huo strode over, his towering frame like an insurmountable mountain shielding me behind him. He kicked over the low table in front of Jiang Mingxue, his icy gaze as though he were looking at a dead person. "What madwoman are you, and how dare you spout such nonsense in our general's residence? Men, beat her out of here." Jiang Mingxue was so frightened by Huo's terrifying aura that she collapsed onto the ground. Trembling all over, she raised her head and looked at Huo's handsome, imposing face, brimming with mature masculine charm, then at me, whom he was carefully shielding behind him. At that moment, jealousy gnawed at her organs like a venomous snake. The Wei Shuxian she had stolen was a good-for-nothing who had failed the imperial examinations and knew only how to beat his wife, whereas Huo, whom she had willingly abandoned, not only wielded immense power at court, but also doted on me beyond measure, even breaking the curse of infertility so that I could have both sons and daughters. "Sister. You lied to me. You knew all along that he wasn't sick, didn't you? You deliberately foisted that beast Wei Shuxian on me." Jiang Mingxue had completely broken down. She lunged at me without a thought for anything else, only to be pinned firmly to the ground by the guards. I looked down at her from above, my eyes devoid of the slightest trace of sympathy, filled only with cold mockery. "What nonsense are you spouting, sister? Back then, you were the one who cried and begged, threatening to kill yourself if you couldn't marry young Master Wei. You said the two of you were bound by an unbreakable love. What is it? Now that young Master Wei has risen to prominence, you're suddenly unwilling?" I deliberately emphasized the words "risen to prominence." The noblewomen around us immediately broke into waves of undisguised snickering. Who in the entire capital didn't know that after Wei Shuxian failed the autumn imperial examination, he spent his days frequenting brothels and pleasure houses, not only squandering his wife's dowry but also racking up a mountain of debts from his amorous affairs? Listening to those grating taunts and watching my lofty demeanor, Jiang Mingxue finally could not withstand the enormous gap and blow. Her eyes rolled back, and amid utter despair and jealousy, she fainted dead away. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, my twins, a boy and a girl, were already 3 years old. Huo's prestige at court was at its peak, and the general's residence was constantly bustling with visitors. As for me, I had once again discovered that I was pregnant. By comparison, Wei Shuxian's life over the past few years had been like that of a rat scurrying across the street. He had repeatedly failed the imperial examinations, his reputation lay in tatters, and even the Marquis of Chongqing's residence had long since cut off its financial support for Jiang Mingxue. However, a month ago, an unexpected turn of events suddenly occurred. The Marquis of Pingyang, who had always opposed Huo in court, suddenly took a liking to Wei Shuxian's sanctimonious manner for some inexplicable reason and accepted him into his circle. Wei Shuxian then won His Majesty's favor with an article that displayed the utmost talent for flattery, and was promoted by special exception to Vice Minister of Rights. This sudden heaven-sent fortune stirred Jiang Mingxue back to life after several years of silence. She firmly believed that this was the true beginning of Wei Shuxian's rise, and that the seat of Chief Minister's wife would finally be hers. On this day, the eldest princess held a flower-viewing banquet at her suburban estate. The wives and families of all officials of fourth rank or higher in the capital were among those invited. Because I was pregnant, I had not intended to go out, but the grand princess had specially sent her attendant to invite me, so Huo set aside his military duties and personally accompanied me to the banquet. The moment I stepped into the peony pavilion in the villa, I felt a gaze filled with malice and jealousy. Jiang Mingxue was dressed in an extremely eye-catching peach-pink cloud satin gown embroidered with golden butterflies among flowers. Her head was covered in glittering gold ornaments, making her look like a walking jewelry shop, as though she feared others might not know that she was now the wife of a vice minister. By contrast, I wore only an elegant moon-white long gown woven with auspicious clouds, with nothing in my hair but an exceedingly rare blood-jade Lingji hairpin. It was a gift the Empress Dowager had bestowed upon me a few days earlier, exuding understated imperial dignity. When Jiang Mingxue saw me approaching, she deliberately raised her voice and giggled at several fawning minor officials' wives nearby. "Oh my, isn't this the general's wife? The rules in a military household really are lax. To attend the Princess Royal's banquet, you're actually dressed this shabbily." Unlike our Wei Lang, he's now highly valued by His Majesty, and an assistant minister of right's salary is more than enough to buy a few fine outfits. The atmosphere immediately grew somewhat awkward. The ladies exchanged glances, and none dared echo this woman who clearly had no idea of her own insignificance. Who didn't know that the general's household had enough wealth to buy 10 Wei families and still consider it a bargain? I stopped and gave her a cool glance, the corners of my lips curling into a mocking smile. If Madame Wei finds this blood-jade Lingji hairpin shabby, then the next time I enter the palace to express my gratitude, I will certainly report your insightful opinion to Her Majesty the Empress Dowager in full. At these words, Jiang Mingxue's face instantly turned deathly pale, and the golden jewels adorning her hair seemed to lose all their luster. She had never imagined that the seemingly inconspicuous hairpin on my head was actually an imperial gift. Speaking recklessly about an imperial gift was a grave offense. You don't use Her Majesty the Empress Dowager to intimidate me. Jiang Mingxue was somewhat flustered, but quickly forced herself to regain her composure and gave a cold snort. So what if you have the Empress Dowager's support? A military commander is ultimately nothing more than a crude person. When it comes to governing this court, we still have to rely on scholars. My Wei Lang is a pillar of the realm personally praised by His Majesty. Entering the Grand Secretariat and becoming a chancellor is only a matter of time. When that happens, let's see how long you can continue to act so arrogantly. What a fine pillar of the realm destined to enter the Grand Secretariat and become a chancellor. A deep, icy voice came from outside the peony pavilion. Huo strode over in a black brocade robe adorned with dark gold cloud patterns. He exuded a terrifying killing aura forged through years on the battlefield, and everyone instinctively backed away as he passed. When he reached my side, his originally cold, hard features instantly softened. He carefully put an arm around my waist and asked in a low voice, "You've been standing for so long. Are you tired?" I smiled and shook my head, obediently leaning against his broad chest. Seeing how gentle and considerate Huo was toward me, then recalling how Wei Shuxian constantly cursed and beat her at home and ordered her to serve his concubines whenever the slightest thing displeased him, Jiang Mingxue's eyes were so consumed by jealousy they nearly seemed to drip blood. At this moment, Wei Shuxian, who had been attending the banquet in the front hall, seemed to have heard the commotion and hurried over as well. He was dressed in a brand-new official robe and thought himself elegant and dashing, but in reality, his steps were unsteady. "General Huo." Wei Shuxian walked over to Jiang Mingxue, putting on a show of a scholar's lofty pride. He gave a perfunctory bow with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "My wife is uncultured. If her words were in any way offensive, I hope the general will be magnanimous. However, there is some truth to what my wife said. When it comes to affairs of the imperial court, military commanders ultimately know only how to fight and kill. Governing the country and securing peace still requires us civil officials." He was relying on the influence of the Marquis of Pingyang, intending to humiliate Huo in front of everyone. Huo did not even raise his eyelids. he pulled a memorial bearing a large official seal from his sleeve and tossed it directly at Wei Shuxian's feet. Govern the country and bring peace to the realm? Huizhan let out a cold laugh. His voice was not loud, yet every word thundered, making sure everyone present heard him clearly. By relying on a beast like you, who, in order to curry favor with the powerful, personally sent your 15-year-old cousin to the bed of Marquis Pingyang's 60-year-old father-in-law? As soon as these words were spoken, the entire peony pavilion erupted. What? You gave your own concubine to someone else? This is utterly disgraceful. It turns out this official position was obtained through such despicable means. Disgusting. The noblewomen and officials around them all wore expressions of utmost contempt and instinctively backed away, as though Wei Shuxian and Jiang Mingxue had something filthy clinging to them. Wei Shuxian's face instantly flushed the color of pig liver. He stared at the memorial on the ground, trembling all over like a sieve. You're slandering me. This is a frame-up. Whether it's a frame-up, you can explain it to the presiding judge at the Dali Temple. Huizhan wrapped an arm around my waist and swept a cold gaze over Wei Shuxian and Jiang Mingxue. Before I came to court today, I had already submitted all the evidence of your accepting bribes to sell official posts and forcing respectable women into prostitution to His Majesty. The people from the Dali Temple should have begun confiscating your Wei residence by now. Jiang Mingxue was struck as if by lightning, her entire body collapsing limply to the ground. The dream she had taken pride in, becoming the minister of the Grand Secretariat's wife, the hope she had pursued by every means possible, even at the cost of devoting her entire life, was ruthlessly ground to dust by Huizhan at that very moment. No. This isn't real. Wei Lang, tell me this isn't real. Jiang Mingxue frantically tugged at the hem of Wei Shuxian's robe. Yet Wei Shuxian kicked her away like a stray dog and fled outside in a sorry state, only to be tackled to the ground by constables from the Dali Temple who had hurried over and placed in shackles. I looked down at Jiang Mingxue, who was crying bitterly on the ground, my gaze so calm that it held not the slightest ripple. In my previous life, she had used the same vicious methods to bring about my miserable death. In this life, she thought she had stolen the wealth and glory that belonged to me, never realizing that this was actually a dead-end road leading straight to hell. Let's go. The air here is too foul. Don't let it disturb our child. Huizhan cast a disgusted glance at the mess on the ground, then swept me into his arms and strode away from the estate amid the awe and envy of everyone present. Behind us, only Jiang Mingshua's desperate, shrill screams remained in the peony pavilion, echoing for a long time without ceasing. The farce at the Grand Princess's estate became the final straw that broke the Wei family. For multiple crimes, including selling official positions and titles and forcing women into prostitution, Wei Shuxian was stripped of his office by imperial decree and sentenced to be executed after the autumn harvest. The Wei family was thoroughly confiscated, and all the gold, silver, and treasures acquired through their sordid dealings were seized by the state. As for Jiang Mingxue, before entering prison, Wei Shuxian wrote an exceptionally vicious divorce letter to preserve the last shred of his pitiful dignity. He accused her of jealousy, infertility, and defying her parents-in-law, then drove her out of the Wei family residence like a stray dog. To sever all ties, the Marquis of Chongping publicly declared that Jiang Mingxue was no longer his daughter and did not even allow her to enter the gates of the Marquis's residence. The second daughter of the Marquis's household, who had once longed with all her heart to become the first minister's wife, became a beggar whom everyone in the capital cursed and chased away overnight. After winter arrived, the capital was blanketed by a once-in-a-century snowfall. In the general's residence, the heated chamber was warm from the underfloor heating, and even the window paper radiated a gentle warmth. I lounged lazily against a carved rosewood chaise longue, covered with a soft white fox fur blanket. Huizhan had just returned from the military camp and had not even had time to change out of his court robes. He hurriedly wrung out a cloth in hot water and carefully wiped my feet, which were slightly swollen from pregnancy. The wind and snow are fierce outside, and you're carrying a heavy belly. Whatever you do, don't go out into the courtyard to be exposed to the wind these next few days. As he gently kneaded my calves, he murmured his admonition. Those iron hands that had once slain enemy generals were now impossibly gentle. I gazed at the focused expression on his stern profile, and an indescribable sense of contentment welled up inside me. If my husband keeps massaging me like this, I'm afraid the two little ones in my belly will become too lazy to come out. I smiled and stroked my greatly swollen abdomen. Huo raised his head, his deep black eyes filled with tender affection and joy that could not be concealed. The imperial physician had already taken my pulse, and this pregnancy was very likely to bring another set of twins, a boy and a girl. They dare make you suffer. Once the baby is born, just watch how I deal with them. Though he spoke harshly, the way he looked at my belly was even more cautious and tender than if he were gazing at a priceless treasure. Just then, my personal maid, Chuanxing, hurried in. Her expression was somewhat complicated as she reported, "Madam, there's a beggar outside who insists she's your younger sister. She's been crying and shouting outside the gates of our general's residence, demanding to see you. She says she's about to freeze to death and is begging you to give her something to eat." The gatekeepers have driven her away several times, but she still refuses to leave. I picked up the bird's nest porridge beside me and gently stirred it, my expression calm and utterly undisturbed. "I understand." I took a sip of the warm porridge. "Tell the gatekeepers not to pay her any mind. If she dares make another disturbance, drive her away with clubs. In my previous life, when she forced me to drink that poison that would tear my insides apart, did she ever consider that I was her biological elder sister? In this life, she has ended up in such a state entirely because of her greed and selfishness. She brought it upon herself. I didn't take her life with my own hands, already out of consideration for the kindness of our parents in giving us life. How could I possibly stoop to offer her that cheap sympathy?" Huo tightened his grip on my hand but asked no further questions. He merely ordered coldly toward the door, "Send more men to guard outside. Don't let those filthy things sully Madam's eyes." Late one night 3 days later, I suddenly woke from a dream, writhing in unbearable abdominal pain. The entire general's residence instantly lit up. Huo paced back and forth outside the delivery room with bloodshot eyes, like an enraged lion. He even tossed aside the urgent military dispatch delivered overnight by the Minister of War. It was not until dawn broke that 2 crisp cries from newborns once again rang throughout the general's residence. "Congratulations, General! Madam has given birth to another set of twins, a boy and a girl. Both mother and children are safe." The door to the delivery room was suddenly pushed open. Huo did not even care about the heavy scent of blood inside and rushed straight in. He knelt on one knee before my bed and clasped my hand tightly. This imposing 7-foot-tall man actually shed hot tears at that moment. "Ming Shuang, thank you. Thank you for giving me a family." Meanwhile, the wind and snow outside the general's residence had already stopped. The faint light of dawn illuminated the vermilion gates, as well as the stiff corpse curled up beside the stone lion. It was Jiang Mingxue. She wore tattered, threadbare clothes, her entire body covered in white snow. Her bony hands clutched desperately at the cold blue stone slabs in front of the general's residence, her fingernails broken and oozing dark red blood. Her eyes were wide open, fixed relentlessly on the lofty, unattainable gate of the general's residence. In those unfocused pupils lingered boundless remorse, jealousy, and profound despair. She had probably heard, in the final moment before her death, the infant's cries ringing out from the general's residence, cries that symbolized supreme glory and happiness. She finally understood that the crippled general she had regarded as worthless had not only failed to remain without an heir, but had instead cherished me until I became the most honored woman in the world. And she, for the sake of an illusory greed, had personally sent herself to hell. The next day, officials from the Jingzhou prefecture came to take away the unidentified woman's corpse. They simply wrapped it in a torn straw mat and threw it into the mass graveyard outside the city. From that day onward, there was no longer any such person as Jiang Mingxue in this world. 3 years later, Huo was granted the title of Duke of the State Protectorate, hereditary and irrevocable, by His Majesty after quelling the rebellion in the northern frontier and accomplishing an unparalleled feat. As the Duke's wife, I stood atop the city tower with 4 exquisitely beautiful children, watching Huo ride back triumphantly on a tall steed amid the cheers of the people. Clad in silver armor and radiating power and prestige, he broke into the gentlest smile in the world upon seeing me on the city tower. He raised the spear in his hand high and saluted me. The 4 children called out joyfully, "Father," while I smiled and waved at him. The warm winter sun streamed down upon me, dispelling all the gloom left behind from my previous life. I wagered the memories of 2 lifetimes on one exhilarating gamble. I never revealed the secret of my rebirth to anyone. Instead, relying on my wisdom and medical skills, I not only saved a hero but also forged an unrivaled glory for myself in this life. In this life, I, Jiang Mingshuang, ultimately won in the most satisfying way possible. The end.